Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Monday edition of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, a big and furry bovine. Today's show entitled Things You Already Know, or Should. I start out the program today by taking a bow. Not because I predicted the NFL games correctly. That's never the case. Not for patting myself on the back, because LeBron today gave as close as to what LeBron will give as an apology for his profane 30-plus minute outburst and tirade after the Warriors game. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I did call one right. I knew who the first NBA coach to get fired would be, and I knew that it would be Jason Kidd. And people said, "Are you kidding? With a young team like that? You sure?" Like, I was sure. And I was sure a month ago, I was sure. Because 23-22 doesn't cut it when you were already that good before Giannis was this good. The Bucks aren't making progress. Jason Kidd was just born to be fired. Just breaking news. Joe Prunty, who we know from Cavaliers background, will be named the interim coach, according to a Woj bomb. Giannis's reaction to Kidd being fired might hurt the Bucks' future. Oh, here we go. You know, the superstar isn't going to care. The next coach comes in, the team starts winning. What difference does it make? We already know this. And in the perfect world of the San Antonio Spurs, Kawhi Leonard's rehab isn't going very well, and there's accordingly some hard feelings developing between Kawhi and the front office and coaching staff of the unequatable San Antonio Spurs. Knowing Pop, like I know Pop, his comment about this whole situation was Tony Parker's injury was a lot more severe and he got back in 7 months, ... Well, Kawhi Leonard's rehab has not gone so well. However, one line in the story makes me believe that there's something more to this than what perhaps maybe between the lines, okay? And between the lines is always hard to read, but I'll see if we can, let's see if we can put a case together here. We sought outside expertise with the best tendon experts in the world. Buford of the San Antonio Spurs said it worked beautifully for Parker. It hasn't worked the same for Kawhi. All right? So then you say, okay, it's an arbitrary thing. There's a whole timeline on this. He missed the first 10 regular season games in October and November. He was coming along more slowly, according to Pop. Then Pop said on November 22nd, he had never encountered a quadriceps issue like the one Leonard is experiencing. Here's the quote. What's really strange is that Tony Parker has the same injury, but even worse, Popovich told reporters. Parker ruptured a left quad tendon in the Western Conference playoffs in May, a far more severe injury, and returned to the Spurs lineup 7 months later. Of course, it hasn't been that Kawhi re-injured it, because Popovich said he did not re-injure the quad and insisted that the organization was erring on the side of caution with its franchise player. And here's the quote, folks. You've got to be confident in your body to go out there and play at the level he's expected to play, Popovich told reporters. We didn't feel he was ready. His confidence level wasn't there. So we decided to give it some more time. The team is 25-14 without him. That might say it all. All right. So long, Jason Kidd, and hello, a little bit of grief anyway in San Antonio as they get ready to play the Cleveland Cavaliers tomorrow. More trouble for the Cavaliers. LeBron James, the last program on Moohead Radio, was dedicated to LeBron James. and his tirade in which he threw everybody under the bus. Well, I really don't believe that I was strong enough in my disdain. At any rate, today LeBron James came out and said, as the leader of the team and the leader of the organization, you could see his chest puffing up as he said it. I'll get to you in a minute, Paul Baker. I'll get to you in a minute, I promise you. He said, but I got to be a better leader. I got to do more, and I've got to be better. Now, I don't know. That's pretty generic. I say he's got to do more because his numbers in the last 12 games suck ass, and his three-point shooting has gone into the bucket. But the interesting comment is, I've got to be better. Why don't we take the word be and extend it to behave better? And then we have as close to an apology as we get from the chosen one. At any rate, the ship needs to be righted, and it's not likely to happen against a disciplined team like the San Antonio Spurs. Paul Baker is asking me live in the chat room, when are the Browns going to hire Todd Haley? You know, it's an interesting thing. This falls right into the premise of our program. Things you know or should. Just because somebody comes from an organization that succeeded didn't mean they were responsible for that success. I could make a very strong argument that Haley coordinated the Steelers right out of the playoffs with miserable fourth down calls that made no sense whatsoever. Could also tell you that there was a rift, not just this season, but in seasons past between he and Ben Roethlisberger. And I think the way that they lost and to whom they lost just kind of hastened the demise of Todd Haley. But the fact that, you know, when you get into a pissing war with Ben Roethlisberger, there's only two possible outcomes. One is you get fired, and the other one is that you get dragged feet first into a men's room and ass fucked. Fortunately for Haley, he was fired. The Browns will hire him as soon as possible, of course, because Jimmy Haslam has this weird belief that he has some connection to the Pittsburgh Steelers other than the fact that he was a minority shareholder. And that obviously none of Haslam's stupidity had a chance to rub off on the Steeler organization because they simply would not let him get close enough. But anything that has the Pittsburgh Steelers name on it, you know, Jimmy Haslam's the kind of guy who buys those Asian duplicate fake products that don't even look like the real thing, and he buys them thinking he's getting the real thing. Look, if I had their offensive line, if I had Le'Veon Bell, and if I had Ben Roethlisberger, if I had Antonio Brown, if I had Juju Schuster, you know something? I'd be a good offensive coordinator. So would you, Paul. You'd be awesome. I'd hire you in a minute. Anybody who ever stepped foot in Pittsburgh would likely get the job with Jimmy Haslam in charge. Do I think Todd Haley is a great hire? No. Do I think he's a terrible hire? No. Do I think he's going to make a goddamn difference with a buffoon as a head coach? No. Do I think that maybe there was a reason why the less the Pittsburgh Steelers threw the football and the better they ran the football, that they were a better team and had a vastly better record? That when Ben Roethlisberger was asked to throw the ball more than 40 times in a game, they had a losing record? Do you think maybe that had something to do with the caliber of players that they had on the field and not Todd Haley? You got to be able to run the football. And the Steelers proved through their history, and, you know, you can go all the way back to Franco Harris and to Rocky Bleier. You can go more recently to the bust Jerome Bettis, and you can then move to the years where the Steelers had no running game and Roethlisberger was forced to throw 40 times or more a game, and they didn't do very well. And then with the emergence of Le'Veon Bell, everything got good again. You have to be able to have balance. And the thing with Hugh Jackson is he's emotionally imbalanced, and he refuses to commit to the run, even if he might be successful. I can tell you this, Todd Haley is a guy who historically utilizes his tight ends a lot and uses the running game a lot. How that helps the Cleveland Browns, I have no idea. No idea at all. David Njoku probably feels good about that, but the fact of the matter is that right now we don't have a running back, we don't have two offensive linemen, and you can't run the ball, you can't pass the ball, especially with an aging veteran quarterback starting and an inexperienced rookie backing him up. But these are things you should already know because we've been down the road before. You know, all I ever heard was, Mike Holmgren, we got Mike Holmgren. Woo! God, mighty, we're going to the Super Bowl. It's like, wait a minute. He's not the head coach? My friend has something to say about that, right? That's correct, BCOD. He was the general manager and he'd never done that job before, and he didn't want to have anything to do. The closest he got to the players was circling around them in a golf cart. Thank you for that piece of information, Black Cow of Death. Is he better than McAdoo, Ben or Bob, Paul? Is he better than Do-Wackadoo? Is he better than Cocky Doodle? You know, there are a lot of older white gentlemen who are circulating, waiting for their next NFL job. Todd Haley and Ben McAdoo would be two of them. You know, I want somebody who fits the direction that the team's going. And we have committed to Hugh Jackson, and he is a verticalized offensive coach. In fact, he was the de facto offensive coordinator. Why would you want to hire an offensive coordinator who is famous for possession routes when you have a verticalized offensive guy as your head coach? It doesn't make any sense to me. None of this makes sense to me. You know, what I would tell you is when it comes to the offensive coordinator position, I would say under normal circumstances, it would make sense if Todd Haley was the offensive coordinator and somebody who believed in a similar type of offensive scheme was the head coach. The second we kept the head coach, it seems peculiar because I don't think that Todd Haley, under any circumstance, would be Hugh Jackson's top choice. And you don't believe that either, Paul. We know that it's Jimmy Haslam's choice. And we know why Hugh Jackson is untouchable by John Dorsey. Because Jimmy Haslam said, he's the guy you don't have control over. Hugh reports back to me. And that way, Jimmy gets his meddling Southern ignorant fingers into the pie. Todd Haley is a Jimmy Haslam hire. Hugh Jackson is saying, thank you for at least not firing me and letting me work another year. And meanwhile, John Dorsey is saying to himself, let's just get good players. We can get rid of these bozos the following year. Once we prove our acumen as drafters. I know Paul, the head coach from New York. I know Bob McAdoo was a basketball player from North Carolina and on to the NBA. I get that. I was joking. I was joking with you. Cows have odd senses of humor. Remember, this is happening live in real time, and you have to follow the mind of a cow, which is not always pleasant or easy. But I can guarantee it's a Jimmy Haslam hire. And so you have one guy drafting talent, a head coach who's holding on by his fingernails, and a meddling, ignorant owner who's insisting on what he believes. And that's very typical of an idiot like Haslam, who never really created anything in his life. He believes in this vague word, culture. His culture is ripping people off and not writing rebate checks to people who've earned them. Culture. And his definition of culture is if it stepped foot in a winning locker room, then that's winning culture. And it's like, he's very shallow indeed. Baker also is saying, I wonder if they're looking at malarkey also. The whole thing is a bunch of malarkey, Paul. Well, sure. They're going to look at everybody in the old boys network. I already told you that on Friday. What you really needed was a new head coach. You know, nobody in the world bought their child little Hot Wheels cars for Christmas if they didn't already have the motherfucking track. Okay? If you didn't have the track and the setup, the little Hot Wheel car was of no value to your child. He wouldn't go and pretend like he was playing with it. The fucking thing went on the goddamn track and went around and around and around. You gotta hire a new head coach. The head coach hires his own offensive coordinator. Oh, the doodah day. It isn't that hard to figure out, except for this organization. These are things that in your heart, everybody, you already know, or should. Here's another one you should already know. The Minnesota Vikings, I'm sorry, Tony, weren't that good. They ran into a buzzsaw, yes, but let me say something. Jacksonville was not cheated, nor was Minnesota. Tony the Calf was on his Twitter feed, saying, this game is fixed. The outcome was predetermined. It's like, stop. Playing the victim. Playing the victim. Not a victim. Both teams lost for a damn good reason. Let's start with the Jags, shall we? The Jaguars have a great, young, fast defense. Really good. I think, and I really think that they put together some very fine pieces in Jacksonville. And they should be proud of the season that they had. In fact, I will go as far as saying that they should have won the game. And I'm not going to point out that, New England only had one penalty on an inconsequential play and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go that way. It's stupid. When they stripped the ball from behind and recovered the fumble, and they proceeded to do nothing with the ball, the game was over. And I know you're going to say, well, wait a minute, they were ahead at the time. It doesn't matter. The same way the game was over when the Browns gave the ball back to John Elway with time on the clock. It was over. You cannot put Tom Brady in a situation where one score to win. At the same time, you cannot expect, once he has gotten that score, for Blake fucking Bortles to lead you down the field. Let's be honest about this. If the Jacksonville Jaguars had any kind of quarterback whatsoever, they'd have won that football game. The defense did everything they could in the beginning of the game to get the lead, and the coaching staff has one arm tied behind his back because they have to call a game that Blake Bortles can play. The second-year offensive coordinator is calling plays from a stance of weakness as opposed to strength. You're in big trouble. When you eliminate certain things off of the menu because your quarterback is only able to do so much, when you know that 80% of your pass patterns are going to be basically within 8 yards of the line of scrimmage, hopefully either somebody breaks a tackle and makes a big play, or Bortles does chuck one down and they do catch it. But other than that, you're going up against the whole fucking menu against the New England Patriots. And if the New England Patriots have one chance to win the score the winning touchdown, they're going to drive 175 yards if they're penalized 6 times in the drive, because Tom Brady's got an open playbook. He's done it so many times before. The coaches have faith in him, and the offensive coordinators pretty well let him do his own thing. They wind him up and let him go. The Jaguars did not have that luxury. They lost the football game, and they had multiple chances of winning the football game. And people are now saying, well, you see, Bortles didn't do that bad. It's like, no, he did not. But he was a limiting factor in an elite game. The Jaguars are not like the Vikings. The Jaguars are an elite defense. The Jaguars have elite players in many facets of their game, but not under center. No. The Jaguars need to upgrade their quarterback. That's why they lost the football game. And believe me, if they had a quarterback who, and I'm not even talking about a quarterback like Tom Brady. Nobody's got a Tom Brady except for the Patriots. But I mean a guy who didn't have like a 25% career winning percentage going into the season. I mean somebody who, you know, who wins, but maybe is not like a superstar. They'd have won the game because they were dominant up front. They were dominant. And they're a better football team all the way around. But that critical position killed them. Now, the Vikings, on the other hand, are another story. More and more and more are being said about less and less and less. I looked at it through the whole season and I said, it's a wonderful story. Case Keenum, it's a wonderful story. Heartwarming story. And it was fun for the people in Minnesota being able to pretend for a period of time that they were going to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium. It would have been a dream come true. Now, I'm not going to take the cheap Tony the Calf path and say dreams don't come true in the factory of sadness that is the state of Minnesota. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Not going to do that. Because I believe that every sports fan has a chance to dream if they're fortunate in their lives. And if they're really fortunate, like Cavs fans, they win a title. We watched it happen. And then 1.5 million of us show up to downtown Cleveland to celebrate. It was a great dream while it lasted. But the bubble was burst in such a way that makes you realize they weren't nearly good enough. Now, I'll say that Nick Foles had an outstanding game, and he peaked too early. I think history will show when the Patriots win the Super Bowl easily that it isn't that Nick Foles is the darling quarterback of destiny. He had his great game, and it happened one game too early. Because the Eagles didn't have to play that well to beat the Vikings. They would have needed to play this well to beat the Patriots, and they're not going to do it 2 games in a row. The odds are really against that. Foles was en fuego, man. Everything that left his hand on the run, standing still, backing up, out his ass cheeks, everything right on the money. Guys were catching the ball. The play calls were crisp, sharp. The defense was all over the Vikings. And Case Keenum was Case Keenum. The dream usually ends when you have a guy named like Case Keenum or Colt McCoy or somebody with a goofy name like that as your quarterback. There's no history of that guy doing that well. I mean, we saw Hoyer get off to fast starts in different places, but eventually the demons wake up. Now, and wait a minute here, Paul. The Eagles did it with a second stringer, but Foles was a starting quarterback who had 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions a mere few years ago, if you remember. He was the one who took over for the dog killer, Vic. Remember? The fact that his head got screwed on wrong. And, you know, a lot of times this is what happens with quarterbacks. They get an opportunity in a limited sample to do very well, and then they get a big contract to go somewhere else. It happened. I can name countless times that this has happened where guys were the backup when a guy got injured, and they'd end up having, you know, Matt Castle would be a good example. You know, you can put them in here if you want in the chat room over here on YouTube. I'd be more than happy. You can think of them off the top of your head probably better than I can. Let me see if I can think of another quarterback. Scott Mitchell took over for Dan Marino and then ended up having a miserable shit of a career. Let me think if I can think of any others off the top of my head. It seems like every other year there's somebody, a guy who gets the big offer based upon limited opportunity. Well, Nick Foles had the dream season, right? Back end of a season. I think he was 8-2 as a starter, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and somebody paid big money for him, and off he went. And the fact is that he has played in games that at least quasi mattered. Case Keenum, no. Case Keenum never even really had a great run of things. Neil O'Donnell, wow. That's kind of scary, isn't it? Quarterbacks are in such demand in the NFL that if you do, even in a partial limited sampling, really well, some team is going to pay and overpay you at that. So it's not a surprise that Case Keenum's a free agent and somebody will pay him. But the word out of Minnesota is that Teddy Bridgewater, the guy who was supposed to have amounted to something, but injuries stripped him of some things, he of the low Wonderlic score, and Case Keenum are not really wanted by the Vikings. And honestly, when you get to a point where you are as close as Jacksonville and Minnesota were, your weaknesses become so much more obvious when you're, you know, you can't hide behind a weak schedule. You can't hide behind, just like Pittsburgh, you know, beating the Browns twice and, you know, beating the Bengals, or, you know, you can't hide behind beating weak sisters. When you're in the playoffs and it comes down to you against Tom Brady, or you know, or against quality caliber teams, your weaknesses show. And the quarterback position is the first one that'll show every single time. You know this, or you should. The final thing that you already know, or you should, is that the Cleveland Cavaliers are in deep fucking shit. Yes, Brian Hallman, Todd Haley is hot garbage. Yep. He's not the reason the Steelers were winning year after year. Let's put it that way. And he had a running feud going with Roethlisberger that you knew that eventually Haley would lose. What's wrong with the Cleveland Cavaliers is so screwy that it's simple. Why do you think players are not giving full effort? It's an interesting question when you have a roster full of veterans. I mean, I think it's a fair question. You have guys who know what it's like to play in situations that are important. They know to take care of themselves. It's not like we're dealing with goofy young players with egomaniacal Dion Waiters-like guys. It's not like that. Why? And what I'm going to say next is my conjecture, but I'll stand behind my conjecture because my conjecture had Jason Kidd fired a month ago. And I took shit for saying it. And I'll take shit for saying this too. Why do you think those veterans came to the Cleveland Cavaliers organization? Why do you think they signed for veteran minimums? Why? Why do you think they stuck around? Because multiple finals in succession. And a guy like Derrick Rose, what the hell? Before I could make my money, Isaiah Thomas, before I go out and make my money, because the Brinks truck is more important to Isaiah than anything. But in the interim, hey, I could be along for a deep playoff run and a possible shot at the finals. So why not? I'm going to come to Cleveland, the home of LeBron James, the chosen one. But what happens when LeBron James goes off on profane tirades and starts ripping his teammates, saying, we've got 6 or 7 guys with the same minimalistic skill set? What do you think happens when LeBron struts around like a proud peacock and slowly but surely takes the credit when the team's winning and distances himself and gives up and loses interest when the team starts losing? How do you think that's going to affect veterans who came here explicitly for the reason that they would be in the finals? Could you say lack of effort? Why do you think it's so hard for Tyronn Lue to get his players ready to play emotionally? Because the guy who really is the leader of the team doesn't believe they're good enough, and he keeps telling the press, well, if the playoffs started today, we wouldn't even make it to the finals. We'd be an early round exit. I've been reading it just like you have. And all those veterans say, you know something, just hold your breath, hold your nose, last out till the end of the year and try to latch on with a better team next year, and the season comes to a screeching halt. Thank you, LeBron. I get tired of people saying, I am the leader, I am the de facto leader of this organization, blah, 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 blah. And then you say things that just bring people right to the ground. The reason the team is not putting out is because they believe what LeBron James is saying. They've internalized it. You know something? It would be one thing if they didn't make some three-point shots. It would be one thing if they just weren't quite quick enough to keep up with the transitional pace at their advanced years. But that's not really what's happening. You scored 124 points against the Thunder. You aren't trying. You aren't working. You aren't practicing. You're not in shape. You're winded like it's still the preseason, and you don't really give a flying fuck. You simply don't give a flying fuck anymore. So that's the way I look at it. I say that all of these professionals are playing like kids who have given up because they feel that their chance and their opportunity to make it to the championship game are null and void. And it has been so much as decreed by the king. And until you start trying, you never know exactly what you could do. No, do I think the Cavaliers could beat the Golden State Warriors? No, not in the 7-game series. No. Do I think they could beat the Boston Celtics? Yes. Yes. If they tried, if they were in shape, if they shared the basketball. And what a joke. Isaiah Thomas is going to sit there and say to the press, see, all these guys are a bunch of fucking assholes. He's going to sit there in front of the press and say, yeah, we play a lot harder in Boston. And it's like, you got swept, you little midget fuck. Oh, yeah, we played defense a lot harder. As I recall, you gave up a lot more points to the Cavaliers than you scored, you stupid midget with a bad, irreparable hip. And who are you to be talking about defense, you shrimp? Give me a break. Everybody yak. The guy can't play a lick of defense. We got stiffed on the trade. It isn't hard to figure out. You already know this, or you should. It's always the people who are the underachievers who shoot their mouths off. Isaiah Thomas, you're not a team leader of the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're barely a player on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you're not going to be a player for the Cleveland Cavaliers very long. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up and go off in search of your Brinks truck, which is never going to park in front of your little midget dollhouse because you can't move anymore. I don't want to hear about, oh, Boston did this better and Boston did that better. Do you know something? Boston has lost 3 games in a row. Do you know why? Kyrie scored 40 points in the last one. They lost to the Orlando Magic team that we were able to beat. And you're saying, wow, you beat them at home. Well, Boston lost to them at home by 8 points and were never in the game. And Kyrie scored 40. Why? Because the young players stopped making their shots. They've lost some of their courage. Things aren't going so well. In the ebb and flow of an NBA season, things go good, they don't go good. And it's the coach and the players who have to pull themselves out of the muck. That's the way it works. Who's to say if the Cleveland Cavaliers made it against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs and it was in the finals? Who's to say? If you're working hard and trying hard on defense and getting in people's faces and they lose confidence and they stop making the shots, you can beat them. Your 81-year-old mother, Brian, was smart enough to have the surgery. Isaiah, who's not really smart enough to talk about playing defense, but isn't smart enough to talk about hip problems because he didn't address his in the correct way. Now, I'm not saying your 81-year-old mother could break Isaiah Thomas's ankles, but damn close. Damn close. If you could teach her that one pause move which goes back between the legs, forget it. These are all things you should know. You should. Because effort is what matters most. And in the playoffs, they allow you to play tougher defense and more physically. And you can get into people's heads that way. But as long as you have J.R. Smith moping and, you got to have a head coach who also is willing to pull the plug. Just like Popovich pulled the plug on Tony Parker as a starter. He looked at it for 21 games and said, man, it ain't happening. You're coming off the bench. Done. Tony Parker's not going to bitch about it. Done. His time has come. Tyronn Lue has hard choices to make. He better be up to making them because J.R. Smith isn't coming back from wherever the hell he is, and neither is Jay Crowder. These people don't want to be part of this organization for whatever reason. For whatever reason. Brian Hallman and his final comments to the chat room of this program, not that I'm cutting him off, but that I'm ending the show. Blake Bortles' last pass would have hit number 12 right between the 1 and the 2 if not for an unbelievable defensive play. And that's the truth. I mean, he stepped up in the pocket. Give him his just due. He stepped up into the pocket. And he threw the ball where it needed to be thrown. The guy just made a perfect defensive play. Perfect defensive play. Give him credit. I'm not just pissing on Blake Bortles. I'm speaking in great generalities when I say that with one possession left in the game, you're not going to beat the New England Patriots with Blake Bortles. I stand by what I said. Kevin Lear says, or General Dog, I called it last year, the Cavs' finals run is over with or without LeBron. It eventually comes to get everybody, this thing called age. But age should never diminish effort. And I don't feel sorry for a team that doesn't try. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this edition of Moohead Radio. Back again at the end of the week to talk about more sports. We'll see. We got 2 weeks until the Super Bowl, so we have plenty of time to talk about nonsense. Until then, have a great week, and I'll see you at the end of it. Bye-bye now.